This is Story Recapped. Today, I'm going to explain a horror thriller film called Bound to Vengeance. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. In a park, Eve is having fun with her boyfriend, Ronnie. He takes a video of her as she laughs and jokes around. Ronnie casually asks her to leave a message for their future children, to which Eve laughs. He instructs her to mention her name, age, and blow a kiss to the camera instead. As soon as she does, the camera then turns off. In the present day, Phil drives to an abandoned house in a secluded place. As soon as he gets inside, he cooks vegetable soup and gets roses before serving it. Phil delivers it to the basement, where Eve lies in bed with her leg chained to the floor. He sits on the bed and encourages her to eat her favorite food. Instead, Eve pulls out a brick and viciously smashes him in the head repeatedly. She immediately looks for the keys and unlocks the chain restraining her leg. Upon being freed, she grabs Phil and puts him on the chain instead. Eve hurries out of the house and discovers that she's in the middle of nowhere with no one to help. She then tries to drive away with the van, but the keys aren't there. Eve screams out in frustration. As soon as she gets back to her senses, Eve heads back inside the house. She tries to call the police, but the phone does not work. While looking for the van keys, Eve finds a revolver and a folder with images of girls, including her. Eve is astounded, learning that she is not the only victim. As she looks at her photos, it reminds her of the memories with Ronnie at the park. That night, Eve quickly takes a bath while she holds the gun, scared that Phil may attack her. She then changes into Phil's clothes before returning to the basement. In the basement, Eve points the revolver at Phil and asks where the other girls are. However, Phil refuses and dares her to murder him. Confident that she won't shoot him, Phil tells her that only he knows where she and the other girls are. If she kills him, she'll be killing the 4 other girls as well. Frustrated, Eve fires in his direction to scare Phil. Still, he refuses to say where they are. Eve grabs the van keys from him and walks away, while Phil guilts her about the others. From the basement, he hears some rustling sounds from above, as if she's up to something. Outside, Eve prepares a snare out of the shower rod and cable wires. She then heads back to Phil and orders him to put the noose around his neck to control him. But Phil strikes a bargain with her first by driving him to the hospital if he shows her the women. Eve agrees, and as soon as he wraps the snare around his neck, she pulls the wire tightly and controls him on the way out. Phil starts to drive to the nearest victim, Nina. When they arrive at the first resident, Eve lets Phil enter the house. She secures Phil on one side and proceeds to locate Nina. In a room, Eve finds Nina crying and calms her down. After unlocking the chain holding Nina's leg, Nina flees the house in fright. Despite Eve's assurance that she's there to help her, Nina runs as fast as she can until she trips over a water hose and falls into a metal fence, where she is impaled and killed. Stunned, Eve stands as she comprehends what happened. She gets Phil, who seems unsurprised about what happened. As he drives to the next girl, he proceeds to tell Eve that she might end up killing the next one too, just like what happened to Nina and the girl who used to be with her in the basement. Eve shuts him up. When they arrive at the second residence, Phil warns her to be careful, as not all girls are sweet like her. Inside, she discovers Laura, bound to the ceiling. Eve orders Phil to unchain her, but he hesitates. Still, he releases her, but not before telling Laura that Eve is about to take her place. Laura shouts that no one will replace her and aggressively beats Eve, allowing Phil to remove the snare around his neck. Eve tries to tell her that she's here to help, but Laura is unstoppable. In self-defense, Eve kills Laura with a gun. When Phil is about to hit her, Eve shoots his leg and hits him with a wooden bar multiple times. Devastated, Eve remembers the night the girl from the basement died. Before their time in captivity, Eve and the girl were close, as they enjoyed strolling around the park with Ronnie. Back at the van, Phil apologizes for putting her against Laura. In his defense, he only takes care of them, but never touches any of them. He tells her that he's not the hunter, but just a zookeeper, and he has nothing personal against them. Phil then brings up Ronnie, who was looking for her and discovered something along the way. Phil promises that he will tell Eve about those horrible things after getting into the next house. Determined, Eve agrees and drives to the third house. She goes inside the house where she discovers Leah. Bound in a dark chamber, Leah begs for help, afraid that they might come back. When Eve questions who she meant, two other men enter the house and talk about how they would force themselves on Leah. As they turn on the lights, they're surprised to see Eve with Leah. Eve recognizes one of them as the maniac who had previously assaulted her. With no hesitation, she shoots him in the neck while the other man runs away. Eve follows him and reloads the gun in front of him. When he's about to curse at her, Eve blows his head off. She eventually sets Leah free and asks her to change her clothes. When Leah asks her to shoot the maniac in the head as he pleads for help, Eve tells her that it would be more painful if they leave him bleeding to death. As they head into the car, Leah shoots many questions, but Eve refuses to answer. When Leah finds out that she's with Phil, she is enraged, prompting Eve to point the gun at her to shut her up. Eve tells her the plan of getting the other girls, asking if she's in or out. Leah agrees to join her and drives the van while Eve questions Phil about Ronnie in the back seat. Still, Phil denies saying anything to her, afraid that Eve will kill him. He then gives an address that leads them to an abandoned warehouse, where they discover a group of girls inside a closed room. The kidnappers had taken them there, and they couldn't do anything but wait for the men to buy them away. Eve instructs Leah to watch the girls and call the cops while she rescues the last girl, Katrina. When she returns to the van, she discovers Phil in the driver's seat. As Phil distracts her, a tall guy sneaks behind her and knocks her out. Eve dreams about the night she and the other girl were taken to the basement. She also remembers a happier memory where she and Ronnie rode a roller coaster. When she wakes up, Phil clutches her tightly and tells the tall guy to take advantage and savor her after everything she did tonight. But he must shoot her in the leg first, like she had done to him earlier. Just then, Leah appears and smacks the guy on the head with a wrench, killing him. Eve punishes Phil for fooling her and demands Katrina's location. As soon as Phil mentions the last address, she strikes his head with a heavy metal bar. Leah then stays at the warehouse while Eve and Phil head to the last residence. As Eve drives on their way to Katrina, Phil's phone rings and she hears the voicemail from his wife. The bloody and severely wounded Phil still manages to mock her for being responsible for the death of those girls. He emphasizes the one with her in the basement. Phil accuses Eve of not sharing the food with her, thus starving her to death. Eve tells him it's over, to which he responds that she's not even close to the truth. Finally, they arrive at the house. When Eve enters, she finds Ronnie sleeping in an armchair. Panicked, she points the gun at him and questions why he's there and how Phil knows his name. Ronnie remains calm and attempts to comfort Eve, but Eve isn't having any of it. He then tells a story about how the police refused to assist him in his search for Eve and how he lost his job due to his desperate efforts to find her. Ronnie assures Eve that she's safe there, then asks what happened to her. Eve puts her guard down and tells him that she was kidnapped and abused, but she escaped. When Ronnie attempts to comfort her again, she hears a disturbance in a room and asks who that was. Ronnie reveals that he met someone else while she was gone, but Eve doesn't believe him. She notices the images of the victims in a folder, but Ronnie makes up an excuse that while searching for her, he discovered and saved many other girls, but not her. Eve directs Ronnie to open the room door and switch on the light. To her horror, she discovers Katrina inside. The truth finally dawns on her. Ronnie and Phil are the masterminds behind the kidnappings. Meanwhile, Phil rips the duct tape holding his hands in an attempt to escape. But before he can start the van, he hears multiple gunshots inside. Then, suddenly, Eve heads out the door with blood all over her face. Enraged, she shoots the van repeatedly. At the same time, the police arrive at the warehouse and release all the captives, including Leah. The bodies of the men who took advantage of Eve were also found. Back at the van, Eve beats Phil back to the back seat. He asks her Ronnie's last words, to which Eve answers by handing the note Ronnie wrote. When Phil sees the location, he begs Eve not to go there, fearing that his wife and daughter will discover his secrets. That morning, Eve hurls him in front of his home when they arrive, sparing his life but destroying his image to his family instead. His wife is horrified to see her husband beaten nearly to death and takes him inside. Eve then walks away from the house. However, as she walks, Eve remembers when the girl who died in the basement starved herself to death, unable to cope with their situation. As Eve mourned her death, Phil walked in and told Eve that everything would be alright, and that at least Eve wouldn't have to share the food with her sister anymore. Suddenly, Eve stops in the middle of the suburbs with a cold and vicious expression on her bloody face. As Phil's daughter shuts the door, a hand holds it open, hinting that Eve returns to exact her revenge on Phil. In the end, it is revealed that it was her sister who died in the basement due to starvation. Her sister's death is enough reason for Eve to plot her vengeance against those who wrong her. When Phil thinks it's over, Eve's memories of her sister prevail over her, leaving his and his family's fate in her hands.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.